Welcome to episode 56 of the Necronama.com. I am James Sabata, horror author, screenwriter, co-host of the podcast you're listening to right now, and I've never been more excited that I don't need to look for an apartment.
And I am Don Guillory, author, historian, educator, co-host of this podcast. And this is pretty much how I felt moving into every apartment complex ever. And I'm so glad that I no longer have to do that.
Today, we're going to talk the new movie One Bedroom, stylized as 1BR. We're actually super lucky to have two people from the crew. Writer and director David Marmor is here with us, as is producer Alok Mishra. Welcome to the show, guys.
Hello.
So I want to start out with one thing. Normally, we kind of we jump to you guys and have you tell us a bit about yourself. I'm going to do that in just a second, but I just want to say this film got to me on such a visceral level because you perfectly fucking captured that feeling when you're all alone, moving into your first place. You don't know anybody. You don't know who to trust. You don't know where to make friendships. And my son literally moved out this week, and you ripped my heart out watching this.
You're welcome, I guess.
I did give him a cat, so that's good.
Good.
No, let's jump to you guys. Like, why don't you each kind of tell us a bit about yourselves, and we'll go from there.
Cool. So I'm the writer and director of 1BR, and this project has had kind of a long and meandering history. It really originally came out of my own experiences when I first moved to LA after college. It was a couple years after college, and I moved down here and didn't know anyone. It was my first time living in any kind of city of this kind of scale, and also living completely on my own, really with nobody I knew. And I lived in an apartment complex that was really pretty similar to the one that's in the movie. And there was just something about it that, really captured my imagination in a kind of an awful way. I mean, there was something surreal. There was something really alienating. Obviously, it's a very lonely experience. I felt very much the way Sarah does in the movie. I was not confident. I've always been kind of an introverted person. And so I just started trying to capture that experience. And then it didn't really become a movie in my head until I started to get really interested at the same time that I moved to LA. I got really interested in the history of fringe religions and utopian communities and such. And that there's a really rich history of those in LA, specifically places that have started in LA. And I was sort of reading about that stuff. So that was kind of background noise in my head. And then those two ideas came together, and the idea of sort of like, well, what if this apartment complex was actually, unbeknownst to our hero, was the site of one of these places. And that was when it felt like a whole movie. So I wrote the original draft. It was one of the first scripts I ever wrote. And then I put it aside for years. And then years later, I had written another script that got some attention and got me representation. And my managers, who are actually producers on the movie, Allard Cantor and Jared Murray, they asked, so what other scripts do you have? And I literally did not have anything else that I felt proud enough of to send to them, except I did like One Bedroom, but it had been years since I'd even looked at it. So I took a look, and it was so old I had to kind of update the technology a bit, and then I sent it to them. And, to my surprise, they responded really positively to it, and they said, we think we can get this made. We think we can get you to direct it. And so then I went off and spent a few months just completely rewriting it. I'd really changed as a writer. I had always been interested in kind of the, what's in the second half of the movie. I'd always been interested in that aspect, but it wasn't the original script was a much more traditional horror movie. It was much more focused on sort of the physical peril. But that was, I think, because at that point when I was a younger writer, I didn't know how to sort of do it the other way. So that was really the main project I had for myself on the rewrite, was to kind of try to focus it more on the stuff that I thought was more interesting. So I did that, and then they sent it out, and it got into Alok's grubby hands.
Yes, it did. I guess that's a good segue for me to go into where I became involved with it. My lovely wife went to high school with the aforementioned manager of David and also producer on the film, Allard Cantor. And between him and his partner, Jared Murray, they have a company called Epicenter. So I went to lunch with him, as you do in LA. It's one of those lunches you just take because you're like, oh, okay, we're both in the industry. Let's see what's going on in each other's lives. And so at the end of the conversation, the lunch, he's like, listen, I got 2 scripts to send you. Read them and let me know what you think. And I, of course, told him I would. But, of course, I didn't for like 6 months because I had another project I was working on that was about to go, that was in pre-production, and I was really sort of focused on that. And when that sort of all fell apart, I was like, holy shit, I gotta find something. So I started looking around, and I read both scripts. And one of the scripts is a movie called Tragedy Girls. I don't know if you've ever seen that before. Great film.
Oh,
they did
yeah.
a great job of combining horror and comedy. But that I used to my cutting it aside for 1 second. My producing partner Shane Boris and I used to test movies. We have a company called Malevolent Films. We're trying to do elevated horror, and so we tested movies for a long time. And what I learned from testing is that it's really hard to do a horror comedy because oftentimes you don't satisfy one audience or the other. It's not horrific enough, or it's just not funny enough, or it's too dark for the comedy audience, and so forth. So I read the script, and I read David's script, and I love David's script. And I called Allard up, and I was like, listen, this Tragedy Girls movie, it's funny, but it's not for me. And they were like, yeah, we just finished shooting that movie a week ago. And I was like, oh, what the fuck do I know? So they set up a meeting. David and I met at the Culver Hotel. We just went over, kind of the script, but also movies we like. We had the same sensibilities, and he's a lovely person, and he's the first-time writer-director for an actual feature, and we were actually first-time producers. So really, what could go wrong? And so we went forward, and a lot went wrong, by the way. I'm making fun of it now, but we'll talk about that, I'm sure, later in the conversation. But that's how we met, and the rest is sort of history. We trusted David. David did an amazing job, and everyone we assembled was very helpful in all these different ways. We had Sam Sandoweiss and Nick Izzy, who were line producers, and we had am I forgetting people now? We had an amazing DP, David Bolin, and we had a lot of people that had great experience. So it really helped us along, I think, as sort of first-time filmmakers. Ricardo Jatan was our production designer. He's an amazing. He did so much with so little in comparison. Ronan Landa did our music for us. He definitely gave us a deal, and more than that, he really loved the script, and he made something with real instruments, by the way, which is something you don't get in a lot of times with small budget films. And it really makes a difference, I think, with definitely horror movies or psychological thriller horror films such as ours. And we also had very good luck with the sound. We actually were able to get my my high school friend / college roommate, Jason George. He does he does Alice in Wonderland, and he's doing our little movie. So it's like,
oh, that's so cool.
We got very lucky pulling all these people together to sort of to make this little kind of endeavor of love, if you will, because it took a long time. When you don't have a lot of money, it takes a long time. That's usually the rule of thumb you have to kind of realize, that I didn't realize as much. I realize that wholeheartedly now. So.
And I've read quite a bit about the things that went wrong and how you ended up with too many energy drinks and down one truck and a couple other things, And I just want to say, I really think that people think Hollywood in general is just this magic thing. Oh, everybody shows up to set and everybody just films their part and it just comes together. And they're always like, I don't know why these executives and these actors and everybody else need this much money. And I'm like, you wouldn't put up with half the shit that we do on some little tiny short film no one's ever going to see, let alone a major blockbuster or anything else,
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, we had 15 days to shoot. I mean, you look at some of these Marvel movies, it's like 6 months, and then they go away for 2 or 3 months, and then they come back for another month anyway. So, I mean, just imagine it on that scale. I mean, it was, I mean, Dave, before, I'll say this, Dave had only done shorts before, and maybe you can comment on like what sort of the difference was, because he always has something really interesting to say, I think, in that regard, about the difference between the shorts and also then the features.
Yeah, it's a totally different ball game. I mean, I sort of liken doing a short to, running like a 400 meter or something, and then doing a feature is like running a marathon. It's you can, if you're doing a short, even 5-6 day, 7 day shoot, even a long short like that, you can just burn yourself out doing it. You can just like work yourself to death, and it's going to be done soon. I'd learned really quickly on the feature, as fast as we were moving, a 15-day shoot is super short, but it's still, that's over the course of 3 weeks or more. And you're not going to make it to the end if you try to keep up kind of a short film pace. So I just learned to really pace myself and try to be protective of my sleep and try to, keep things on as much of an even keel as I could. That was one of the sort of biggest lessons I learned from this experience.
And that makes a ton of sense.
Yeah. I was going to say, he did that despite us having probably, what I've heard from other people, one of the worst sort of pre-production sort of things go on, because we as you alluded to with the energy drink stuff, we lost the three main members of our cast 4 days before shooting. We were sitting there on a Monday, and on a Thursday we were going to shoot. On that Monday, we lost our lead actress, who was going to be Sarah. We lost the character that was going to be Brian, and then we lost our Miss Stanhope character because, poor thing, her husband collapsed, rushed to the hospital, died. So we lost all those things in like one day, and then had to scramble to like try to figure out something. We actually ended up pushing the movie back like a week to the next Monday, and we just had to go crazy trying to like figure out how to get like all these other people to come in. And I mean, thank God. And David absolutely agrees with this, because this was his first choice. We got Nicole Bryden Bloom for the Sarah character, because we got on the phone. We're like, listen, can you come out here? We're going to shoot this day. And she's like, okay. She just jumped on a plane. And I think she literally met David with like she had a carry-on with her. Mm-hmm. And stuff.
Yeah, she was straight from the airport. Yeah, we met for like a half hour at a coffee shop just to say hi. And then I think the next day we got about 3 hours to rehearse. And then I think then one day off, and then we started. There was just no time at that point.
So she was basically already in character getting on the plane.
Basically, yeah. Yeah. I mean, well, yeah, she's New York based, so it really was very similar to Sarah. She was coming cross country and, landing in LA, not knowing anyone. I think she's actually talked about that in interviews, that was one thing that kind of made it a little bit easier for her, was that her personal circumstances sort of arriving here were a little bit similar, just sort of walking into this big machine that was already in motion.
That's crazy. Wow. Yeah. From my point of view, I don't know about you, Don, but like, I didn't feel like she was a new addition at all. Like, she seemed like she was 100% like doing these lines forever and like ready to do this. And her mastery of emotion and the journey that this character goes on, holy shit.
Yeah,
like, she blew me away.
She's incredible. We got so lucky to find her. I can't say enough good things about her. I mean, she's just, for as young as she is, she's just so incredibly skilled. And I was not really aware of what a 15-day schedule meant going into this, as this was my first feature. But coming out of it, I just remember thinking, like, if we did not have Nicole in that role, I think we literally might not have finished the movie, because we had very simple coverage. It was usually a couple of angles on any given scene. And then we had time for 2 or 3 takes, mostly. We just didn't have time to spend any time on anything. And I mean, you've seen the movie, like, she gets to these incredible places, and there's so much complexity going on her face. And she was getting there on take 1. And then I had this amazing luxury that on take 2, I could say, well, let's try a little, let's play with it a little bit. we've got it on take one, so we can try it on take two. And, we made our schedule largely because of Nicole.
Yeah, I mean, she can literally cry 8 different ways. I mean, she's amazing. She's definitely destined for even bigger things, I think, in a lot of ways. And I can't say what to betray a confidence, but she is like she is doing auditions with like A-list people right now. So we wish her well, because honestly, it just makes us look smart. Because basically we hired Jamie Lee Curtis. We got Jamie Lee Curtis for our Halloween. Like that's sort of what's happened here, or Fog or whatever. But I mean, to David's point too, Will, you didn't have a lot of time, and in even getting our other actors, like we were sitting there on the Friday before the Monday we were going to start, and we basically. I saw a bunch of reels for older women actresses, and Susan Davis was one of them. She's actually the mom in War Games. Fun fact. Right. And also Robert Altman's cousin, just so you know. The late great Robert Altman. But he got her out here, actually. He's like, you got to come out here. There's all these girls out here. I don't have half the talent as you have, and you're good looking. It's like, all right. So she did. And she's a really great lady. But she had I looked at a bunch of reels that morning. It was a Friday morning. And essentially I saw her reel and there was a number at the end of it. And I called the number thinking it would be her agent or manager, but it was not. It was her. And I was like, all right, this is highly inappropriate, but I'm going to pitch you the movie. I'm going to pitch you us. And she was like, I've never been in a cult movie before. And I was like, and she loved it. And so we signed her by 11. And then fast forward to that night, we're sitting in Barney's Beanery around 6:30 because, drinking. But because you don't have a movie, you're just like, are we going to have a movie or not? And so we were out to everybody. We're calling all our friends, trying to make them keep the agencies open, like Jason Blum and like his head of post-production was trying to call CAA, different places. But thankfully we got a call just around 7 from Giles' manager, Giles' agent at Gersh. And Gersh was amazing helping us out with his entire film. But it turned out that Giles was on the way down from like San Francisco, and he had to pull over to the side of the road to read the script on his phone. He only read his part, and he just said yes. And we're like, holy shit, we're making a movie. And we're just praying that they showed up on Monday. That was a bigger thing, too, because we're like, that's so much crap that went on with this movie thus far. We're just hoping that everyone shows up. And everyone did. So that was the happy ending, sort of, to that story, before other things.
So hearing these stories and seeing the finished product, it blows my mind that these things came together this way. It seems so flawless and not at all rushed. I would argue that my favorite characters are the ones who were replaced. So I think that that's just serendipity, It's amazing how well that worked.
There's, I think, this has almost been true in every movie I've ever made, all my short films as well. There's always an incredible amount of luck that goes into it. And I remember a quote, and I'm not going to remember who it was from. It might be Otto Preminger, who said, the best things in pictures are accidents. Like it's always sort of the unexpected things that happen that sort of breathe the most life into a movie. And I've definitely found that to be true in my own experience.
Don, you know what? Let's let you start because we've just left you on your own and
no, I'm just soaking all this stuff. I'm like, all right, do this, do this, do this. All right, don't get.
They don't know that I do this to you every week. So.
It happens. Well, I like at least this film. It's very relatable for a lot of people. You don't have to be a young woman moving to LA to get what's going on. If you've ever left home, you get this right away. That idea of I'm going somewhere else. I need to find people that I connect with, I can hang with. I need to find this bit of comfort. And what's great about at least the start of this film is you see how the vulnerability of Sarah comes out because she's unsure about so many things. There's she wants to be a designer and all these things. She has these plans for what's going to take place in her life. But she's bearing the trauma from the life that she just left, trying to create something new, being uncertain, at hitting that quarter life crisis that we all typically hit, and not knowing what the hell was going to go on with her. So I watched the trailer for this film, and even seeing the stuff in the trailer, and I came back and watched the film, I was like, things are too comfortable right now. Like she's got in the apartment. This has gone on. It's like something bad is going to happen because I already feel like, she's being taken advantage of somehow. She's being taken advantage of at work. She was probably taken advantage of with her family. Like, what is going on? How were you able to capture the vulnerability that we all have had in similar situations, be able to put it down into the film this way to where it transfers so well?
I mean, I don't know if I had an answer to that, I would be a lot richer probably. For me, the answer is lots and lots of rewriting. I go through so many drafts of everything I write. And I like one of the things I'm really working on right now as a writer is trying to just be faster at each iteration, because I know I'm going to go through 12 drafts of something to get it right. So I'm trying to learn to become faster at each one, but I'm not having a whole lot of success at that yet. For me, what I always start with is there's like a very clear feeling in my head. And then when you start to break it down into like, well, how am I going to convey this, especially in a medium like film that's so limited in how you can convey any kind of interior idea. My first few attempts at it, either it doesn't come through or it comes out in a really talky way, which is never satisfying, or it's very cliched. Like you always sort of reach for those things first. And I find that it just takes me time. It just takes me time to get it to where, it feels smoother. It feels like it's getting the story told, but not, but in maybe a slightly unexpected way or a slightly more interesting way than I originally did it. So yeah, I don't have a really good answer to that. It's just, it's a lot of sweat.
Well, I guess I could change it to at least include all four of us. But what were those moments where you kind of, within your own lives, where you kind of related to Sarah? That.
Well, I mean, so Sarah, yeah. So I sort of alluded to before, Sarah is really very heavily based on me. There's obviously some specifics because it's a female character, and sort of the backstory with her father and everything is not my own. But that was really, I brought that in partly based on a good friend of mine who, we sort of bonded over the underlying feelings of all this stuff. That was all that backstory was there to kind of help create a character who felt like I felt inside. So there, so much of Sarah was not difficult for me to kind of get at, because she really was me in a lot of ways. That sort of that lack of confidence, that that she's a people pleaser, which is also what I've always been. She's and that's one of the reasons why she's vulnerable, I think, to this particular situation she finds herself in. Right, is that she's very much wants to make other people happy. So that was all stuff that I could just sort of access on my own, and felt. It felt appropriate also based on the research I had done into cults and so forth, that was sort of made her a perfect mark in a way.
No, and I think that one of the strengths that really comes from all of this is that while Sarah's journey inside the apartment complex is about finding community and, just that feeling of belonging, she clearly has that in her own family as well. This is nothing new to her. It's already a hole that's inside of her that she's trying to fill. So while I look at it and I see her walk into this apartment complex and I'm like, everything is way too good here. This cannot be real, right? Like, she doesn't have that. This is exactly what she wants. This is that thing she's looking for. And so while it might be too good to be true, and it definitely is in this case, like, it's gotta feel so good in that moment. And I think that is such a strength of Sarah's character, of that exploration, because you did this great thing where you give just enough backstory that we totally see that she hasn't felt this belonging for who knows how long.
Right.
And I just want to say thank you for not overdoing it.
Yeah.
But
You're welcome.
but no, it's such a balancing act, and
Yes.
it's so perfect in this, and I love it. So
Oh, thank you. Yeah. I mean, it's I always sort of in phrased it to myself that Sarah is looking for a new family. Basically, she's getting away from this very dysfunctional family she came from, but she needs, as you said, she needs to fill that hole in her life, and then she finds this place that seems to in a really unexpected place. Right, she's come out here on her own and is not expecting to find that. And then, so I think that to have it sort of present itself to her, she doesn't question it as much as she should.
Yeah. But I mean, at the same time, I also really like how in order to get this thing that she wants, she has to experience isolation. Like you can't have one without the other. She has to be isolated from what she did have, which wasn't good enough, in order to get what she wants. If this all went correctly.
Yes.
Right. Like not even to start on what actually happens.
Right. No, I think that's exactly right. Yeah. That it's a process of kind of, they call it reconditioning, but essentially kind of like resetting you in a way, right? Separating you from everything. And then you are kind of this blank slate. And now you can join this community and truly be part of it. I remember with myself, like it's such a difficult thing to move away from home like that. But in my case, I wasn't trying to get away from my family. I love my family. My parents are in the movie, but,
Yes.
You still like, I came down here for, I wanted to be a filmmaker and this was the way to do it. But it was still like, there's this kind of activation energy you have to get over because, there's going to be this period of misery, this period of loneliness and of struggling and of not, of questioning yourself. And in my case, at least, I certainly knew plenty of people in film school who had no shortage of self-confidence. But I was not one of those people.
Let's jump into a different direction here. Anybody who listens to the show has probably heard me say cats are sacred to me, and I can't handle anything happening to them. Me and Don have had panels where he argued that you kill the dog in a movie because it makes people care more. And we had like audience members try to physically attack him, so I want to. So,
You're misquoting me. What I said was you have to kill the dog to make the audience more angry in some cases with the killer, because you then question if he's willing to do that. What is he or she willing to do, or it willing to do to a human being?
I would tell you this though, Dave knows this, he's heard this a million times, but I used to test movies for a living. I did market research for film. Anytime you kill a dog in a movie, you don't want to kill a dog because that will always make everyone's overall enjoying the movie go down. Always, without doubt. You don't want to do it. Like Marley and Me being an exception. It's a book. You see that coming a million miles away. Okay, fine. And Michael Myers has killed a dog in almost every movie too, by the way. I know that. But he's just senseless, crazy person, right? So, but a person has a mind who can actually make a decision and kills a dog. That character is going to be hated. Overall enjoyment will go down. So when it came down to it, I was like, yeah, we can kill a cat. We just can't crucify a cat. We just can't. And that was what David at first wanted to do, weirdly, because he loves cats so much. But we didn't. And when we went to the test screen part of it, I wanted to go back and put special effects to see that cat just flying out of the oven or something on fire. I mean, something weird. And everyone else, out of the test audiences, 75% of the people did not want to see that. That's why I lost that argument. But 25% that did want to see it were the hardcore horror fans. And so there was an argument to be made for that. But our film is not a horror movie. I mean, our film is a psychological horror thriller. It has elements of horror, I would say, with a psychological thriller. Definitely. So we had to sort of appease the major part of our audience because we weren't just gore fest of a film, right? So that made the most sense. And I was outvoted for that, and gladly so. And David will tell you, he would have fought me. He would have fought me on it had I won the argument.
I mean, I had Shane on my side anyway.
Yeah. He had the majority of people want. I'm the only one who really wanted to see that cat,
you really
cat coming out of there, or explode or something.
Alok had a friend of his do concept art for what the it would have looked like, and it was so horrifying. I was like, it was like something out of like Alien or something. It was like
I would love to see
eyeballs. I gotta see if I can dig up the picture, but it was like
I totally forgot about that until now, right?
and I remember saying like, Alok, you're the one who made me take out the original cat death because it was too gruesome, and then I wrote this like, in my unbiased opinion, very elegant death scene where you don't see it, but you get it, and it's horrifying, but it's not, gratuitous. And then you're like saying, "Oh no, we're not seeing enough. We got to see the cat on fire and smoking.
Let its eye blow up."
Yeah.
The eye like popping and melting down.
Oh God, it was
the matter was it was going to be like $3,000 to do all the shit that I wanted, and I was like, "Fuck that, we can't afford that."
That's the real reason. That's the real reason.
I mean, if I'm being taken to court, I might say yes.
Professor.
I adore cats, and this is still like, it's one of those things that had to happen because it solidifies that Sarah's alone, and it really works well for the follow the fucking rules that we have going on,
Yes.
And the consequences of not following the rules. Like, it accomplishes so much so quickly. And yet, as much as I love cats, I would love to have seen the cat crucified. I'm probably in the minority who would have also liked to see the cat jump out of the oven.
Not on this episode. I think there are three of us who are.
The funniest thing is the thing we get kind of like, everyone loves our film mostly. Like, you could kill human beings all over the place; they don't give a shit, right? Second you hurt that cat, they're just like, "Oh, I will never watch that. I'm out." Like, or I started watching this film. I'm like, it's in the trailer that something happened to this cat.
Yes,
you should be aware. I'm sorry, but we have comments on like Amazon and whatever, like, and it's like the top comment. I will never hurt an animal. And it's like it's like saying like, okay, I want to go to a boxing match, but the second some guy punches the other guy in the nose and I see blood, I'm offended by all of this. Like,
I feel like that it says, I remember this idea being driven home to me. I guess that was like late 90s. It was when I saw Volcano, and it really struck me. And I remember writing about it, that it says something weird about human nature. But I remember watching that movie in a theater, and there's literally a scene where I can't remember the name of the actor, but he's like this, like, he's a real sort of solid guy. He's an ally to Tommy Lee Jones in the movie, and I think he's some scientist, and he's on like a LA Metro train car trying to like figure out what's going on, and then the lava comes, and he gets trapped on the train car. And literally, he dies in the most horrible way you can imagine. He sinks like feet first into this lava, and he's like screaming and like sinking into the lava and dying.
Isn't he carrying somebody too? Like, he's like trying to throw somebody on a train or something?
He might throw someone on the train before he dies, yeah. And like, it's just gruesome and horrible. And it's like, and he's this great guy, and you're like, and the audience, there was like almost no reaction. It was just like, yep, another guy died.
Yeah.
And then there's literally later in the movie, or maybe it's earlier in the movie, at another point in the movie, the whole movie stops for like 5 or 6 minutes to follow a dog that's trapped in a house in this long circuitous scene where the dog like barely escapes and jumps through the window. And this cheer goes up from the audience because this fucking dog has escaped. And look, I like dogs, but I was like, the number of thousands of people who die in this movie, either on screen or off screen in horrific ways, seems to have made less impression on the audience than this one dog escaping from a burning house. And what does that say about who we are? But it's just like, yeah, I think, it's something. I think it's something about like the helplessness of them. They're so, animals, our pets are so kind of reliant on us, and they're unable to express themselves. I don't know that I've really come to a perfect answer, but I've sort of like thought about this a lot. Like, why is it that we find it so much more intolerable to have cruelty against animals in a movie, whereas we don't blink when there's incredible cruelty to humans in movies all the time?
Well, I would say that's true, except for one instance: babies. If you're gonna kill a baby, like, everyone's like, everyone hates you.
Well, that would go to the sort of helplessness theory, right? That it's it's
So-
these
And it's
creatures
cute.
that
And
kind
it's
of
cute.
has- Yeah.
It's cute.
Absolutely, yes. No, we've talked about this on panels, and the conclusion that I came to in one of our panels was that we view dogs as this creature that gives us unconditional love.
Mm.
And we view humans as assholes because we deal with them all the time.
Right.
And so
There are a
we're
lot of
like, you
assholes.
must have done something.
I got to say, I know some asshole dogs too. You know,
I do too.
So,
Yeah.
Mm.
And yet, you know what? I probably wouldn't cheer if they died. I'd be
no,
like, oh,
yeah.
poor
Not
thing.
mine. Not mine. She just stayed right next to me. Right next to me. Her name is Ripley, by the way, after Sigourney Weaver's character from the You can cut
Nice.
that out. You can cut that out if you need to. That's a non sequitur.
No, but I think that goes to the babies as well. Like you get that unconditional love feeling and just the innocent feeling, like they haven't done anything to deserve this.
Right.
And I don't know, like I will say I don't feel the same if an animal kills an animal in a film as I do if a human kills an animal in a film. So I don't know if there's something there as well.
No, I think that probably there is. Yeah. That's really interesting.
What about you, Don? Do you have any feelings on that?
I don't know. I was just thinking about the wildebeest trampling Mufasa and how that tore up everyone in 1994. But
Almost everyone. Scar for life. Woo! Oh.
number one uncle. No, I mean it does go to that this idea of innocence, and you have to rationalize exactly why someone is deserving of that ill treatment or punishment, torture, whatever it is, because the question then becomes, well, at least especially with the cat in this film, again, spoiler alert, the idea that the cat didn't do anything wrong. Sarah's the one who did this wrong.
Yeah.
Who was wrong in this. So, yes, we can be upset with the people, but if Sarah hadn't brought that cat, like she was told not to bring the cat,
Victim
that
blaming.
would not have happened. No, I'm not blaming Giles.
David snuck the cat in real life to his place too. So
Yeah,
I think was probably
that little storyline was based on the fact that in that apartment I lived in, I was on the set of my thesis film in film school, and somebody picked up this stray kitten, and it was just the nicest kitten. It just would like nestle in your arms, and I just remember thinking like, this cat is not going to survive on the street. And I couldn't have a cat in my apartment, so we found another crew member who already had a cat and said, "Can you take this cat home?" And she was happy to. But then she called me, a week later and said, "My cat is not taking to this. Like, you got to get this cat out of here." So then at that point, I took the cat and ended up with a cat in my apartment that I wasn't allowed to have. Nothing like what happens in the movie happened, but it did contribute to that sort of feeling of paranoia that I had living in that apartment complex. And so that was sort of where the seed of that storyline came from.
Well, the issue with the punishment for having an animal is typically it's a fine, and you might get kicked out of the apartment. So, I mean, at least from Sarah's perspective, it's, this is my cat. If I get in trouble, I get in trouble. She's not expecting what takes place. And, at that point, it's pretty much too late for her to go anywhere, because now she's further isolated, further alone, even more vulnerable, because now it's not just the fact that Giles has been murdered and that she's by herself, but now it's who did it? Who can I trust? Who's the one who could have possibly done this? And, what could they do to me?
Right.
Well, I mean, spoiler alert, she finds out pretty quickly. Like, it's like, do the cat? I'm like, in jail. It's like,
Oh man. Let's go that direction for a minute. So we're talking about how she's breaking the rules and people are clearly watching her. Somebody's leaving her notes saying, basically, you're a bitch because you're not taking into account what the rules are or how they're here for everybody's safety.
Mm-hmm.
And
selfish bitch.
Selfish bitch, yes.
That's the key word.
That is the key word. I should not have missed that one. But, this whole place basically acts as a panopticon. Yes. Everybody's always watching each other. There's literally cameras watching you. There's cameras watching the cameras. I mean, it's the ultimate panopticon, really, other than Facebook. And so I love the prison feel. Whether it's an actual prison or not, like, you're still kind of locked in. Mm-hmm. You have to have a guy buzz you out, But what really got me are the camera angles. And I don't know if this was purposeful, and this is my question to you. You can almost never see the sky, even in the open courtyards. Mm-hmm. And this gave me such a prison feel because you're always looking down. You're always looking into this confined area. Everybody has the same cell, aka apartment. You go out to the courtyard for get-togethers and whatever else. But was it purposeful to not show the sky, or was that like a scheduling thing that I'm used to with shooting films?
No, that was very purposeful. It was also it happened to be a feature of this apartment complex. It's a 3-story complex, and so you really would have to tilt the camera up on purpose to see the sky. But it was, that complex, when we got it, I remember, because we didn't have a lot of choices of places that we could afford to shoot in. And when we saw that one, it was like, oh, this is it, because it had exactly the feeling that I remembered from the place I'd lived and exactly what I needed for the story, which was that, when you first walk in, you could pleasantness, right? There's trees, there's a pool, there's a trellis, and then you turn the camera the other way and you have these like 3 stories of stark beige breezeways. Mm-hmm. and cameras everywhere, and those cameras we didn't add those cameras. There are cameras everywhere in that complex, it's like, oh, it's perfect. It looks like a prison when you turn the camera the other way. I think like the only time I intentionally shot the sky, there's probably other examples you'll think of, but like the one time that I remember thinking like, this is when I want to see the sky, is when she first comes out from the wall sequence. She steps out on the breezeway, and there's that moment where the sun hits her, and she looks at the plant, and there's like, it's the sky behind the plant, behind the potted plant, and it's just this moment of like, oh, there's still a world outside this place. That was definitely on purpose. But the location, locations are such important characters in movies, and this one was just so perfect.
Well, when we saw that, when we were really looking, I think literally a week before, even we were looking at places and stuff. Yeah. And when we saw that place, it was so interesting and Spartan looking. Yet had a courtyard. Yet had different aspects that we could kind of like work with. That we got. I mean, again, very lucky. It's a totally, people are living in that apartment when we're shooting, right? And so they were so nice, by the way. That's the crazy thing. Because a lot of times people are like, you're upending my life. Like, why do I have to shut up? So that apartment complex was awesome in that way because the people were so nice. And even like people wanted to be in it from the apartment complex. They were like, can we be in it? We're like, sure, free extra.
Hell yeah.
But yeah, no, I love that you latched onto the panopticon idea. That was always very intentional in sort of the whole construction of the community, was that this is a panopticon. And one of the things that I was really interested in sort of building what the community was this idea of, almost every cult is based around a charismatic leader. Mm-hmm. And my thought was to try to have one that was self-perpetuating, where there either was no leader or it didn't matter who the leader was. It just was this kind of self-perpetuating. It was based on principles, in the way that, a lot of sort of long-lived organizations, nations, and religions and so forth, they're not based on a single charismatic leader. That's not good for longevity, right? So that the idea was that this was this thing that was created to go on, and the sort of central idea behind it was that there's not an authority policing anybody. They're policing each other. Like, it is attempting to be this kind of perfect community where they're all watching out for each other in both senses of that word.
No, and I think that works so great. Go ahead.
Said that it was either Brian or Jerry, but when you brought up the thing about it doesn't matter who our leader is, as far as when Sarah starts questioning, what is it, L or B, and he's been dead all this time. Who's the leader? Doesn't matter who our leader is. And that I wrote it down when she said, when it was discussed, and I just thought to myself, like, how many organizations have we all been a part of where that's kind of how it is? It doesn't matter who the leader is. These things change because even when it got to the 4 principles, I started writing down leadership, or the acronym leadership, that you have to learn when you're in the Army, which is loyalty, duty, respect, selflessness, or crap, I'm going to be a really bad veteran. Selflessness. God, what is it? Honor, integrity, and something else. Professionalism. And so I'm sitting there like, holy shit, the first few weeks, that's all they would tell us. Like, you've got to recite this, got to recite this, got to recite this. Sleep deprivation from very first day. I was there for maybe 20 hours before I got to a bed. I thought it was 3 days. Yeah. And I can only imagine how long, because I can't remember if this was addressed or not, but how long Sarah was in that room and made to feel as though it was a long period of time, because she's put in that stress position. Your body clock, or at least your mental clock, changes to where things that you enjoy go by quickly. Things that are painful to you go by a lot take a lot longer. And so I'm sitting there like, she could have been in there for 1 day, but it would have felt like 3 weeks because of the stress that's on her body.
I mean, it's intentionally unclear, because of exactly what you say. Like this, we're watching this from her perspective, and she doesn't have any idea how long she's been in there. She's losing all track of time, because they've created this entirely artificial environment, right? There's no natural light coming in. They're turning the lights on and off whenever they feel like it. Like you said, her body clock is all screwed up. But yeah, it's really interesting that you bring up the Army, because the stress position, the use of loud music, a lot of those techniques are basically things that I came upon when I was reading about military interrogation techniques. And when you talk about the Army itself, with this, this idea of leadership, that acronym, the Army is a great example of an organization like this, right? You could replace any particular leader in the Army, and the Army will go on just fine. It's not dependent on, it's based on rules. It's based on these systems. And I was in terms of the community, I was always interested in what felt like an interesting metaphor to me in terms of like sort of thinking about this from a societal level was, when you look at how people live under totalitarian rule, and you wonder how they, why they don't throw off this terrible society. Well, I think what I was trying to get at in the movie is this idea that like there's not probably any particular person, if you took them aside and say you're free to go, there's not going to be any consequences, they would want to walk out. But they're locked into this system where they're responsible for monitoring the other people, and they know the other people are monitoring them. And that felt to me very true to life in terms of the way repressive governments work, for one thing, but any kind of repressive organization. Also, even abusive relationships, I feel like work this way.
Well, there's that loss of community and home if they leave, because now you become familiar with whatever this is.
Yes.
Not saying trauma should ever be something that you're familiar with, but you see how that people that do leave those situations have a problem adjusting to, something that we would, as James hates this word, something that we would typify as normal. It's as far as like knowing how to react to people just being nice for the sake of being nice, or someone, passing by you without an ulterior motive or something going on there. You do have people in cults that go back because adjust to the outside, and even to skip ahead with the ending. I kept thinking, I'm like, is she just going to realize like there's nothing out there for her in the world and just say, I'll just go back?
Just go back, yeah. I mean, that would have, you could have justified that on a character level. Yeah, I mean, prison is the same way. People have been in prison for decades, have trouble adjusting when they come out. I remember hearing a heartbreaking story about these teenage boys in it was that, I can't remember, Warren Jeffs, that fundamentalist LDS church. And, they were sort of horribly abused, but they had a hell of a time adjusting when they left. It was sort of the idea of being ostracized from this community was kind of the worst thing they could imagine. And then when they left, it was really difficult for them to cope. I think that's just psychological, right? You become, I mean, we're all kind of experiencing like a very mild version of that right now in the world, right? Where, I remember when I first moved home and, everybody is, everything is shut down. It felt so weird and hard to deal with. And now 3 months in, this is just life, and like, I think it's going to feel weird to go back into a restaurant.
So talk to me about the nailing to the wall. Was that originally part of the script that had the crucified cat as well, or did it like become this? Or
No. No, so that they were always separate. So the cat wasn't exactly crucified. Alok was being a little florid with that. The cat was nailed to the door. That was the way the cat died originally. And with the note nailed to it, with the sort of the memo rather nailed to it.
Right.
And there was a connection in the sense that there were nails and a hammer involved. But the nailing to the wall was, to my mind, that was the one thing that I basically invented that I did not get from research into sort of interrogation techniques and such.
Uh-huh.
And the idea behind it for me was, it was twofold, but the main thing was that it was meant to be the final thing that would take away any resistance from her.
Yeah.
That if she sees that this is happening to her, that there's just no hope, right? That what they're trying to do is get her to give up. And once she gives up, then they can remold her in their own image. And that's what does it. And in fact, to my mind, the key moment in that scene is the second hand, which you don't really see, right? But they do the first hand and it's played like a horror movie, right? There's there's these big stings on the hammer hits, and it's meant to be very shocking, and we're seeing the gore. And then he just walks around to the other side of her and waits.
Right.
And he doesn't say anything. He doesn't make her do it. There's no physical coercion. And our composer, we talked about this really a lot to try to get the music right there. And I think he did an amazing job. The music just really subtly shifts there, and it stops being horror movie music, and it goes into kind of her piano theme. And it's because what's happening, and what Nicole is doing so brilliantly on her face, is she is, without even being told, she is giving up and voluntarily putting her hand on the wall for the second nail.
Yeah.
And that to me was always the key moment of that scene.
No, and it's such a beautiful scene to me. This is probably my favorite scene in the whole film. It's just once she has the one nailed there, as you say, she's pleading not to do the other one, but she doesn't sound like she's actually pleading. and I don't know if that's in the script, but she's already given up, and Nicole hits this so hard and so perfectly that it's not don't shoot me pleading. It's, oh, fuck, this is going to happen. There's nothing I can do pleading. Yeah,
it's that kind of half-hearted, giving the one last attempt, but already knowing what the answer is.
But that's literally what solidified Nicole as an actress for me. It was that. It was, there's so much being said there just with tone. And I don't know how much you guys discussed it, if at all or whatever, but holy shit, that moment is what just got me with this film.
Yeah, no, we spent a long time talking about that, because it was such a crucial scene. So that was one of the things that, we worked through in our couple of hours of rehearsal, and then on set as well. But again, with Nicole, she's so smart. She had gotten it from the script. So I was sort of walking her through it. And it was largely just because we were shooting this whole thing so out of order that she just needed some help staying oriented to where she was in the character. But then once she sort of knew what this moment was and what it represented, that's all her. She made life so easy for me.
That's one of my favorite scenes, because you watch the audience and the audience is so just transfixed. And when it happens, there's even guys that came up to me. They're like, oh my God, I'm the biggest person. I love Texas Chainsaw Massacre. Whatever, your fucking movie fucked me up. So, just in that minimum sort of minimalistic way, let's say, that we got to people, interestingly enough. And the other part of it is that we didn't kind of continue down that path, because a lot of people thought, oh, this is where it's going to go. And they're very happy that we kind of, I guess, pulled back from that part, if that makes sense. And
that totally makes sense. Yeah, we all got kind of used to Saw and Hostel and that kind of stuff, that it's nice to see it not go there. Like it serves its purpose. Mm-hmm. It changes her life. It makes her give in, and then it's gone.
Right. Yeah. The whole purpose of that section, I mean, I felt that we needed to go through that with Sarah. Like, we needed to see it for a couple of reasons, but one of them being that, like, it does exactly lay out the consequences, right? This is how bad things can get if you do not follow the rules, because most of the rest of the movie, there's almost no violence, right? It's the what follows for most of the rest of the movie is just psychological. It's just her living there, but there's always that threat hovering over everything. And I think it colors everything that happens after that.
And I think even that connection that she forms with Edie from the beginning, at least from beginning to end, it is very telling, because Edie's stumbling, which, when my wife and I were watching the movie, I was like, that woman's full of shit. That woman's full of shit. Something's not right. It's like, something's not right here, because she's stumbling and Sarah goes to help her. I don't think this is right. But she saves her. What's crazy, or at least what's really cool about the coming full circle with her and Edie, is that Edie saves her the pain or prolonged pain in this transformation, because Edie comes into that room and says, hey, here's what you got to do. I made it. Mm-hmm. If I can do this, you can do this. Yeah. Which is a great way to, not because I wouldn't even say brainwashing, but just the way that the community works to build people up after you've been broken down.
Right.
To build you up and say, like, oh, shit, I'm an old woman and I did this. Like, for Sarah, that idea that, one, she's trapped here, and those words of, the sooner you give up, the sooner you'll be free kind of echoes. Mm-hmm. But that idea that she has that reinforcement from somebody she's formed a bond with, that mother figure, mm-hmm. that she now has after losing her own mother to cancer.
Right. Yeah, no, I feel like you read it exactly as I would have hoped. Yeah. And that's sort of, in a way, sort of the positive side of all this, right? Like, it's not, it was really important to me to try to give the community an underlying ethos that I actually believed in. So I think, like, sort of the underlying values that they were hoping to achieve with this are ones that I do believe in, and they do have, in some ways, if you can look past all the horror of it, like, they do have a kind of ideal community where everybody is working together and everybody's helping each other out. They're all looking out for each other, and I think that's exactly right. That it makes a powerful impression on Sarah that Edie comes in and sort of shows her that they've all been through this, and they all kind of do that, right? Then Esther, the doctor, shows her mm-hmm. her scars,
right?
Mm-hmm.
And it's there's this idea, there's this egalitarian idea to it, right? That they're all in this together.
Well, I was going to say one thing. The thing that I always think about is that we never sexualized any of this. This cult isn't trying to have sex with Sarah. They're just like actually, in their minds, good people trying to do good things.
Yeah, no, I mean, I think, like, the idea is that I think their ends are in some way noble. That if everybody did live in this kind of selfless way, we would have a much more harmonious society, especially if you look at what's happening in the world today. But it's just one of these things that also feels very true to life to me, that you have when people believe that what they're striving for is literally saving humanity, then there's just no limit to what they are allowed to do to get there, right? And that's what you see here, right? They have these horrific means to their very noble end.
Well, I mean, even during Sarah's torture scene, for lack of a better term, like, I did expect it to go sexual, and I was really glad you guys didn't go there, because I feel like that's really easy. And it almost like it would have diminished everything the community supposedly stands for.
Yeah, I mean, it would have been utterly out of character for them, right? Like, they one of the things that was really important for me is that they truly believe in what they're saying. Like, and this was a direction I gave to everybody who's in the community in the movie, and especially Jerry as the leader, is you are the hero here. You are, there's no sense of sadism. They don't enjoy doing this to Sarah. it's a necessary thing that they have to put her through. It's like punishing a child or whatever, but it's because you love the child. And so that was really important to me. It would have made no sense for them to be sexualizing it, right? It's they I think in their own minds they really do love Sarah and they want her to be part of their community.
Yeah, and the closest you come to sexual issues at all is when Sarah gets matched up with Lester.
Right.
And even then, it's not even forced, because Lester, when they go back to because they're going to be a couple or a pair bond, and even when they go back to Lester's apartment, it's kind of like, hey, I understand this is weird for me too. This is strange, and it's not, hey, you are my pair bond. You've been selected by the group, and now I must have like. It even shows how we're going to take our time with this. Your responsibility, I guess, is the way you could put it, is you've got to create another generation.
Right.
But
that's exactly
in reality, let's look at it this way. That's kind of the same stuff that gets passed down within any society, which is, hey, your responsibility is to create more babies for the future.
Yep.
And create a better world for those kids. Mm-hmm. So it's not too far off. All that comes is, at least all that comes here, is the lack of the choice as to who you get to reproduce with.
Which is also a feature of many societies. It's it's an arranged marriage, basically.
And what I like about it is that you give Lester the opportunity to feel the same. Like, it's very... We all expect it with Sarah. We're following her. She's a female, blah, blah, blah. She has this other guy she's way more attracted to. I don't know that she is anymore after he held her hands. But, but Lester was definitely not on her list, right? But you do the same with Lester. Lester doesn't want her. He wants Jesse back.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. And I really liked how you were able to get that... just that feeling in there without it being weird. Like Lester instantly becomes so much more relatable once you know his story, and just kind of like, you really see that he's, I don't want to even say victim, because he's sort of choosing this or whatever, but like he's in basically the same position Sarah's in. And I thought that was really refreshing.
Thank you. Yeah, no, that was, that was exactly what I was hoping for, is that we're sort of, especially with Lester, you see it to some degree with other characters, but especially with Lester, the goal was kind of constantly deepening our understanding of him. He starts out as just kind of this boogeyman, right, who you see from a distance and he looks creepy. And then they kind of use him as a scare, to show her the consequences of resisting. And even that, to my mind, is a little bit deepening him, right? Because now it's like, oh, he's not just this kind of ogre. He's a victim of these people, but he's also part of it. And then, with that final scene between them, hopefully that's sort of really revealing, his humanity. And that, it's hard with a movie like this where there's a lot of story to get through. And there's so many characters, you can't spend a lot of time with any of them. And my hope was that he would sort of stand in for this idea that they are all both perpetrator and victim at the same time.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. No, definitely. And I lost her name. What's the older lady's name?
Edie.
Thank you. Even Edie has that. We get the great Edie death scene. I really like how... And I know this is the purpose, but the way that it brings through your role in the community is always the community. Even if it means you're not a part of it anymore.
Right.
And that is hard. Like, that is such a great scene. Watching Sarah react and realize what's happening. Even just the way that they end her life. You get there and you kind of get the feeling like, oh, well, maybe it's going to be like an injection, or it's going to be, like some peaceful way to go. And holy shit.
I mean, the funny thing is that, I chose that particular method partly because it just was an image that I liked, right? It's a really,
oh, it's great.
It's just a horrifying image, but also that literally is one of the best ways to go. Is if you pump an inert gas like nitrogen or carbon dioxide in, it's just like going to sleep, apparently. You feel nothing. Huh. Yeah. It looks awful, but it feels fine.
So you're saying it's better for the victim than the people watching.
Exactly.
Well, also, there's like in the scene when we were shooting it, like Naomi Grossman couldn't wait to put that black bag on her head.
She kept jumping the gun with it.
Every take, and like finally Dave was like, "Take it easy, take it easy."
Well, it's funny because I didn't have it in the script, but because she kept doing that, it gave me the idea, which is what's in the movie, which I think works much better, which is to have Edie actually nod to her to say, "I'm ready." Yeah, and that's what she does now in the movie.
Yeah, and that works so well.
Yeah.
Because that's that final doing something for the community. Like you can't get any more final than that.
That's right. She has truly absorbed the four foundations.
I gotta say, I was surprised to see Naomi Grossman. Like when she showed up, like I didn't look up the cast beforehand or anything, and I was like, "Oh shit, this is great!" and then she played a way smaller role than I expected. So.
Well, I mean, to be honest, the reason for that is I've been friends with her for 20 years. Like we've known each other since when we were kind of both in college. I think was a little older than her, but she went to Northwestern. I went to USC. I had a friend that was in her class. And so when she moved out to LA, like we were some of her first friends because we were, friends with this other person. And we just stayed in touch. And, as far as her success and everything was concerned, we were right there with her, cheering her along. And finally I was like, "You got to be in my movie." And she was like, "All right." And it was
that's awesome.
Part. And she was smart. She was very sweet about it. And the funniest part is we did a couple reshoots. We did like 3-4 days worth of reshoots that everyone had come back for. And the funny thing was that she had gotten nominated for an Oscar. Not Oscar. She got nominated for an Emmy, And she was going through all this great stuff where she had all these parties and everything else to do the week that we were shooting. And so it kind of sucked. She's like, "I'm here for your fucking movie, Mishra." And I was like, I could be in this gifting suite getting shit from I got a trip to Tahiti and whatever else. Like, thank God my mom's in town. She's going for me. She's going for me to this gifting suite. So it all worked out in that regard. But I'm still friends with her to this day. She's an amazing actress.
Yeah, she was so generous to come in and do this movie, and an important part, but a small part.
There are no small parts.
Right.
No, and her role, like really, her character does play a super important role because it makes me start to wonder, even the, I guess, supposed leader, he didn't probably get to pick his wife or, these different things because of how everything works, and it doesn't matter who's in charge.
Yep.
And I thought that giving him a wife really solidified what Community is about as well. It's not just this power hungry asshole who's controlling everybody or sleeping with every woman that's in his concubine,
right.
He has basically, in that regard, he has the same role the other families have. Yeah. And I thought that's so cool. And obviously, that's what you're shooting for, but it's something you don't normally see. So I really liked it.
Excellent. I'm glad you responded to that. Yeah, that was a thing that I really wanted to kind of hammer home this idea that everybody is in the same boat here and sort of, exactly like you said. I suspect it's never explicit in the movie, but I would imagine that he also did not choose, that they did not choose each other, but were assigned each other in some way.
Unless they showed up and, there happened to be a need for two people at one time. But
right.
Outside of that. Now, one other little tiny detail I just want to come back to really fast, as long as I'm just telling you things that I loved. I really like when the doctor is looking at Sarah's hands and saying what a good job he did by not,
right.
You didn't separate this and you got this at just the right angle. I loved that. It's such a good thing because so often with, torture porn like Saw or that kind of stuff, people get up from things that they shouldn't be able to move from.
Yes.
And it kind of pulls you out if you know anything about that stuff. So having somebody literally point this out, I thought was great as well.
Yeah. That was a little bit of, for that exact reason was, I'm on your side with that stuff. It always irritates me when, people are getting, bottles broken over their heads or whatever. And then they're just getting up and they're fine. It's fine in a certain kind of movie. It's great. But it also felt, what I liked about it, I put it in not only because I felt like it kind of sort of explained things, but also because it felt in character in that. And if you see actually the way I directed Brian, you probably don't notice it at the time because hopefully you're just horrified by what's happening. He's really careful about where he puts the nail.
Yeah.
In the moment. And, that to me is very much in character, right? Like they do this a lot, presumably, or, not, they're not doing it every day, but like, it's not the first time they've done it. And they don't want to be causing permanent harm to these people that are going to be their neighbors.
I mean, I think he even changes the angle that the nail's going at when he's doing it or something like that. So yeah, I definitely noticed that. So Sarah's kind of accepted everything and she's taking her place and she's watching the cameras and becoming a part of this. And then we bring back her friend from earlier in the film, who is now becoming the next chosen one to be tortured. And Sarah has to basically be a part of the torture, the breakdown, whatever we want to call it here. And, I was not expecting that to be where it went, and I was very pleasantly surprised that that's what we were doing. And I really like how we never get whether Sarah had completely given in, whether she was still looking for an out. We don't know for sure, and I don't want you to tell us, even if you do know. But what I love about this is she's not prepared for this. If they had given her a different person, she might have been fine. Might have.
Yeah. Yes.
And that's fascinating to me. So I don't know if you want to talk about that at all, or
no. I think like
many rules.
When I think about sort of like what is the fundamental error on their part, and the fundamental error was bringing Lisa in specifically. Because I do think that that's what sort of like wakes Sarah back up in some way. Is this person who was a paragon of kind of like self-reliance and strength for her. She was the person that she idolized in that way before all this happened to her. I think that was just the exact wrong person for them to put her in front of. But it's the idea of that sequence really was if it was somebody else. It's putting Sarah now into the Edie position, right? It's sending her in to kind of be the softer side of this thing and say, look, you're going to get through this. Everything's going to be okay. You're going to come out the other side. It obviously doesn't work out that way, I think, primarily because of who Lisa is. But that was the idea of it, was to kind of bring Sarah. I liked the idea of bringing Sarah full circle in terms of her life cycle within the community. And it's interesting because in the original draft, the very old one, I tried to do it as a reveal. So you basically lose Sarah, and the things played out a little differently. So you could have believed that Sarah had died trying to escape. And then we bring Lisa in, and it's as if Lisa's being brought in to kind of replace Sarah. And then there's a reveal where Sarah walks in and she's still alive. And I liked that reveal, but then I realized that I was really robbing myself of the opportunity to see Sarah on the other side of this equation. And all that stuff where she's with Jerry, and then where they're watching Lester, make the pipe sounds on the computer and so forth, like all that stuff. I felt like was important to kind of see, to really now see it from the other perspective, to see the whole process from the other side.
Yeah, I agree. No, I like the reveal that you're talking about. I think this is way stronger because I do think that, and maybe again, it's Nicole's acting, but I feel like that journey is the whole thing we needed. So yeah. I love this.
Yeah, I think it was definitely, especially as I rewrote it and I made it much more subjective. Like the way the movie is now, it's entirely from Sarah's point of view. So it really didn't make sense to be cutting away from her for that kind of length of time.
Teaching about history, and then also I have a film as history course that I teach. And when we get to the 1950s, especially, it's one of my favorite periods to talk about because of the misconception that we have about 1950s America. one with respect to gender, with respect to race, religion, all that stuff. Because the cookie cutter version of the 1950s is everything was great. You had middle class, people were getting homes, everything was great in America. To the point where I like Back to the Future, and I actually use that film to talk about how badly we talk about or teach the 1950s. To when he goes back, and the only incident that comes up is Goldie Wilson talking about he's going to be mayor, and the guy says, "Hey, you want to clean up this town? Start by the floor." Yeah. Oh, a colored mayor, that'll be a start. That's like it. Mm-hmm. But you get into, to sexual expectations with women, saying you can't ask a guy out. You have a lot of these rules within society that get into what you're supposed to do and what you're not supposed to do, that no one has really ever said, this is the way we do it because it's put in stone. We're doing it this way because that's what's expected of you. And we're doing it this way because that's kind of the way we've been doing it. And you have a lot of people don't question this. So I thought what was great was that you had Lester as well as Sarah questioning this, and you kind of see questions start unfolding for Sarah. You see Lester is sitting there. He's had his questions of the society where he's lost his ear, or, he's lost the functioning of an ear and lost an eye from trying to leave this society. And I think that whether we're talking about 1950s America, where you're seen as an outcast by doing certain things that run counter to American society, or what the perceptions of what a good citizen is, or even in the 1960s where you started to have a counterculture. You have the same thing taking place here, where you have people start questioning it, and they don't feel safe in the societies that they've been welcomed into and told that they should be safe in, where dissent is not okay. Asking questions is not okay. So the best way to be safe and secure, to go back from that to that earlier quote, the sooner you give up, the sooner you'll be free. And my question when I was watching this, and when I talk about the 50s or the 60s or even the 80s for that matter, is what is the cost to be free? Is giving up meaning I'm going to give in to this punishment that you're giving me? Or are we talking about I'm giving up who I am to meet what your expectations are of me in society as a male, as a person of color, as a female, as a religious person, non-religious person?
Yeah, I mean, I love hearing you say that. That really is sort of one of the main sort of metaphorical levels that I was interested in with the story. Is this idea of, I feel like there's a constant, at least in my life, and I think this is true in society at large, like there's a constant tension between, if I call it being true to myself, doing what I want to do, being who I want to be, and being a good citizen, in quotation marks, meaning, am I a good friend? Am I a good partner to my spouse? Am I a good family member to my family? Am I a good member of my city, my state, my country, the world, right? And I think there, just as you said, there is, in order to be part of something, you do give up some of your identity. You give up some of your freedom, and you give up some of your identity, hopefully voluntarily. But I think that's the cost of it, right? And it's a constant balancing act of how much is it reasonable to give up in order to gain the benefits of community and, the togetherness, the safety, the extra productivity that you can have as part of a larger group. And I've never come to a really satisfactory answer myself. I have friends who are extreme libertarians, who have come down, on one side of this. I have many friends who are, much closer to being socialists. And they're very different approaches, but I think they're all struggling with the same question, which is, you're going to give something up either way, right? And that was sort of a central question that I was grappling with in the idea of writing this. Like, I'm not condemning this community. Obviously, like they're very extreme and they're awful. But like, I do believe that sort of the underlying values that they're striving for are worthy values. It's just they're going about it in an extreme way. And, I guess we're going to get into the ending in a little bit, but like, to me, that's one of the things, when people sort of talk about, this is really a hidden condemnation of communism or of socialism, and, it's about individuality. My answer to that is, well, how does Sarah get out? She does not get out on her own.
Right.
That's awesome.
Right? Like, she needs somebody to help her. And he makes this incredibly selfless sacrifice, which is exactly the value that this community has been espousing. And that saves her, that gives her freedom back. So it's not as simple as black or white to me.
To add to that, going back to what I said about how Sarah was looking for family, right? So family is its own community. And when you reach this, not final scene, but the scene with Lester, that's family. That's the family they've been given to be together. And that's their community. And he sacrifices himself for that community. And I think that is going to very powerfully lead into the end here, because what is community? Is it these two? Is it everybody in this complex? Is it all of these other complexes with their lights flashing as Sarah tries to escape?
Right.
Like, you're not a part of the community next door, or else they could go get somebody when they need somebody, but they have to bring in an outsider, right?
Right.
So while they might be doing the same thing as you or something similar, and cameras might be watching them as well, you're not a part of that community. Yeah. And I find that in and of itself so fascinating, because as much as the end feels like, oh, it's happening everywhere, that doesn't mean that it's happening in the same way everywhere.
Right. Yeah. Presumably they all have their own, they've all evolved their own, set of cultures and traditions and so forth within their own little closed societies. And, the idea there is, in my mind anyway, it's never specified, but there is interaction between them in the sense that, that's the answer to the question, who's watching us, that gets asked earlier. They're keeping an eye at least on each other's surveillance rooms. So there is sort of this larger connection between them. But I think you're exactly right. Yeah, like they're not all exactly the same. They're sort of subunits. And then, yeah, I love actually, I've never sort of thought of it in exactly the terms that you said, but yeah, in some way, Lester is being more true to their values than they are in the way he interacts with Sarah. That is, in real life, we don't choose our families either. Right. But you make the best of it, and you love your family, and you do your best by them. And that's kind of what he does.
Well, I could also tell you that we actually had multiple endings that we filmed that would not necessarily make that the case, because I think one of the arguments we were going through, not arguments, but we were having discussions. And it was when we were editing the film, the Me Too movement had come up, in a very big way. And so one of the thoughts was like, well, Sarah needs to escape on her own steam. She doesn't need to have someone help her, let's say, for example, right? And my point actually was like, this place is so hard to escape from. How would she escape unless she did have some help, right? That's kind of sort of my take on it. And like I said, we filmed two different endings, but the ending you see is the ending we actually all decided upon at the end of the day. Where, Lester does help her and stuff. As a nice sort of aside.
And which is what was in the original script. One of the alternate endings I wrote for those reshoots had her getting out on her own. I think I had the possibly mistaken idea that I needed to let her have her personal growth, if that makes sense, that she had, become strong enough to get out. But I think we get that just with sort of the fist at the end, that determination. And I think, we would have lost more by losing that moment with Lester.
Well, I mean, I don't think that Sarah at the beginning of the film would have been capable of stabbing a man in the neck.
Right. Well, one hopes not.
I'm just saying, some people are capable of that. They are hopefully not in that situation.
Right.
But I think if she had been in a situation where she should stab somebody in the neck, I don't think that Sarah at the beginning could have pulled it off.
No, I agree.
So I definitely think that we get her growth. And I, for one, really, really like this ending. I love how the whole community's coming at them towards the doors and how Lester is literally the only thing protecting her. There's something great about the visual. It's almost like a zombie horde, and that one guy who sacrifices himself so that you can get away. Only he does it in a different way. But I want to back up for just a second. The part where she shoots, what's his name? Thank you. When she shoots him, I love this moment because it's not overdone. A lot of movies would like make this like the focal point. He's just like, you're not gonna, and he's dead. And then Lester's like, shit, like.
Yeah, I mean, they all kind of
focus where it belonged. Is my point. It belongs on Sarah.
Yeah, that was the night we shot that. We had like 4 different key things to shoot, right? So Brian getting shot and going down like he did kind of perfectly. We were just like, can we move on?
Yeah, it's funny. We did have more coverage of his death, and then he did this one take where he just reacted perfectly and just went down like a ton of bricks. And I always wanted it to be a sudden moment, like mid-sentence, a shock. And it was so shocking to see it in one shot like that, where he just kind of collapses out of frame. So at that point it was like, well, that's great. And also we have like 2 hours to shoot the entire ending of the movie. So moving on.
Yeah, we had to reshoot it, by the way, anyways. But the point though is that one moment when he gets shot is one of the most enjoyable movies to watch an audience watch, because there are just so many expressions and just like, oh shit, like it is such a good feedback thing for me to watch that moment.
And you probably get a couple people cheering.
Oh yeah,
for sure. Yeah. Like different places they would clap out loud and cheer and the whole thing.
That was the saddest thing to me about losing our theatrical run to COVID was I really wanted to, because at some of the festivals when you had a really packed audience and a really good audience, you would get cheers in those moments, and it was like the greatest thing I've ever heard.
Man, I really hope that this even if it's smaller places like the Film Bar here in Phoenix or things like that, I want to attend a big screen showing of this at some point in the future. So,
you and me both.
Well, I really, truly hope that happens. Until we get to that point, I want to thank you guys for coming on the show today. I truly love your film, as I'm sure I've said 200 times already, but you probably never get sick of hearing it, so it's okay.
Absolutely not.
I love the psychological journey you take us on. I love Nicole's acting. I love your entire cast. Everything you went through, it worked out for the best, man. It is so good.
Agreed. Thank you.
For me, it was a lot of that, but it was also the fact that the film makes you question a lot of societal behavior that we all participate in. So it goes beyond just what's on screen. It causes you to do a lot of self-reflection.
Well, what's interesting about it too, and I don't know if you mentioned this when I was gone, but like the whole idea of us being in quarantine right now is very apropos to what that film is about. Like, I mean, literally, you can't leave your place, and you don't trust your neighbors, right? Like, because they're you disease, and it's like a whole thing. Like, it really is sort of, for the time, an interesting sort of commentary.
I think that's a truly excellent point, and honestly, I don't know that there's a better place to end this, because that really brings it full circle and brings us back to how important this film is right now and everything that we're facing in life. So with that said, I want to thank you both for coming on the show today. If you want to tell everybody where to find you online, and once again, just want to drop some places they can watch the film.
Cool. Alok, you know the places.
On VOD, on iTunes and Amazon and DirecTV and AT&T and Vudu and any other major digital platforms. It's pretty much on. If you're in Canada, Bell Canada, Shaw Canada. If you're in England, iTunes, Amazon, Google Play, Virgin, Sky Store. Yeah. But that's most all of the places.
Awesome.
But yeah, please. Oh, Vimeo. You can watch it on Vimeo too.
It's on DVD and Blu-ray too. Excellent.
All right. And where can we find you guys on social media?
I am at dmarmor, DMARMOR on Twitter, and at David_Marmor on Instagram.
Cool.
And I'm just running our social media for our film, so 1BR_film, whatever.
Awesome.
That's what you can reach us. If you just want to Twitter us, if you want to follow us on Twitter, that's awesome. If you want to follow us on Facebook, it's the same 1BR_film.
Excellent. I want to say you're very responsive online as well. So if people want to hit you up, they totally can. And that's always awesome. All right. Yeah. So that wraps it up for this week. As always, I am James Sabata.
And I am Don Guillory.
And we will see you next week here on the Necronama.com.